When I was a sophomore at my school, my parents died in a car crash. My brother and I were left to take care of ourselves. My brother at the time, who was 19, was legally old enough to be my guardian. Growing up with him, I didn't realize anything was strange. I mean, he was my weird older brother. He did weird things. But I heard my friends' stories about their siblings and I thought, even though he was weird, he was completely normal. That changed pretty quickly, however, after my parents were gone. I had this friend for most of my school life. Her name was Kira, and we did everything together. At the time, she was definitely my best friend. We tried to see each other as much as we possibly could outside of school. We went to the same school, but we were in different classes. Her parents weren't all that strict and they let her stay at my house a lot. Even after the accident, they didn't mind. I think they even possibly encouraged her to spend more evenings at my house so I wouldn't feel lonely. However, things with my brother started to take on some weirder tunes. Things started happening that made me feel rather uncomfortable. Kira and I would be on the couch watching a movie and eating a pizza. I would turn and see him watching us from behind a door. Once, we were in the bathroom washing up. She had the shower, I had the bath. We were just casually chatting as we washed ourselves. Then I heard the floorboards creak outside the bathroom, and I noticed a dark shadow under the door. Things like this started happening more and more regularly. I told myself, he's just bored. He just wants to freak me out. He's just being a perv and he wants to see Kira naked. He's a teenage boy. It's what they do. These sorts of things would go through my head whenever an event like this happened. It was normal. However, one weekend my best friend blew off our plans. She said she had some plans with someone else and she avoided mentioning who it was when I asked. I was upset. Partly because I was jealous. Partly because my friend was hanging out with someone else and wouldn't tell me who it was. I didn't like secrets. She never told me who it was, but after later events, I knew she was hanging out with my brother. She started coming over on weekends again, but as excited as I was for this, I quickly turned sour. She wasn't there for me. On the couch for movies got replaced for on couch my brother. The time chatting in my room turned into make-out sessions in his room. It made me angry. I would yell at my brother and her about it, really. How unfair it was that he had stolen her from me. One day I came home from school and there was a padlock in his bedroom. I rolled my eyes at the time, figured he had gotten up to naughty couple stuff. Didn't want me to access his room and snoop, find things. And then, as soon as it was there, it was gone. No more padlock. That night, Kira's parents called the house and asked if she was here. That was the first indication that something was wrong.
We just need to know that she's safe.
I explained to them that I hadn't seen her since the day before last, because it was true. But I also mentioned that she wasn't in school. They had been trying to call her cell phone to no answer. I told them that I would ask around a bit, and if I heard anything, I would call them immediately. I went right to my brother's bedroom. I started to snoop. It wasn't clean inside. It was very messy. Nothing that indicated something had happened by my brother. Just his normal slobbish behavior, things all over the place. But considering the padlock, I thought I would definitely come back to a completely clean room. I decided to call her cell phone. I could hear it vibrating, and I found it under his bed. At this time, I confronted my brother about it. He was instantly hostile. He was very angry that I was in his room. He yelled at me about privacy and respect. I told him that Kira's parents had called me, that she hadn't come home that night. I demanded to know if he knew where she was. He explained in some relatively colourful language that she had broken up with him, that she had cheated on him. That was 2 nights ago and she must have left her phone behind, being just too embarrassed to come back for it. I called her parents back and explained that she had broken up with my brother just a couple of days ago and she walked out forgetting her phone. Parents were shocked. They didn't even know that she had a boyfriend. At this time, they thought that she was coming out only to hang out with me. We had a very long conversation, explaining that she didn't hang out with me all that much anymore. That I still considered her my best friend, but her interest was actually in my brother. They asked some deeper questions about their relationship, and I answered truthfully. I know that they made out, but I didn't think they had gone all the way. After all, I found nothing in my brother's room to indicate that. The laws here stated that because he was under 24, nothing illegal had happened, even if that wasn't the case. Everyone was still very worried. As far as we knew, she had broken up with my brother 2 nights ago and stormed out, forgotten her phone and never came back. Was never seen again. I was an emotional wreck. Yes, I was mad at her and my brother for getting together and forgetting about me, but I never wanted anything bad to happen to her. She was my best friend. My brother told me that the police came to talk to him at his work and that they may visit me, which did end up happening. I had a meeting with them at my school's office. It was accompanied by my homeroom teacher and my principal. It was very emotional. I told them everything that I knew at the time. That the day before I found out that she had not been home, that she had broken up with my brother and forgot her phone. They could tell I was distraught. A couple of months passed, with no word. I started to get over my initial shock. And at the same time, I started to notice something very unusual. My brother had been spending a lot of time down in the back shed. The shed was my father's workshop. It also had a small wine cellar beneath it. I say shed because that's what my father used to call it. But it was more like an open-plan lounge room, fully insulated with brick, not some corrugated iron building. It's where my dad used to do wood carvings and watch sports with his friends. I remember when Mum and Dad had it built, they were so pleased that they would have a wine cellar that was below the frost line. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I started to get curious about what my brother was doing there so much. Maybe he was sorting out all of Dad's stuff for sale. Maybe he was picking up an old, unfinished project. So a little while after he had gone in, I decided to creep around. I peeked in a window. I couldn't see him at all. This confused me.
What's he doing?
Then I remembered the wine cellar. He must not be dealing with everything very well.
Do you think he's drinking?
He'd been in there drinking wine, all alone, getting drunk. That's what I was thinking anyway. The next day, before he had got home from work, I was feeling a little bit rebellious. I decided I would go down there and take some of the bottles for myself. How dare he wallow in his own misery by himself? If he can do it, I can do it too. So I went down and got to the door. It was locked. It's the same padlock that was on his door. I was furious. I started to try and pull it off. It was useless. There was no way I could rip it off. I was mad and just having a small childish tantrum. As I was walking away, I thought I heard something,
Help me, please help.
but I dismissed it at the time. I was stomping. Maybe it was a sound from the neighbors. That night, when my brother came home, I accosted him for having locked the cellar door. And he turned on me like I had never seen before. One moment, he was taking off his work boots, and the next he had pushed me up against a wall and his hands were around my throat, telling me that if I ever go down there again, I will regret it. And I believed him. I was crying. I could hardly breathe. He didn't let me free until I was nodding that I understood. After that, my brother was nothing but hostile to me. He was always weird, but this was another thing entirely. It's like a veil that was hiding his true nature had finally fallen away and was now revealing his ugly truth. I could feel his eyes on me every move that I made. I wasn't even allowed in the backyard, and I was scared to think what might happen if I ever went near the shed. One day a balloon came floating over the fence and it got tangled in our orange tree outside. I reached for the door handle to go out to collect it, and he spun on me. He grabbed me by the wrist and squeezed it and screamed at me to sit down. The mark on my wrist lasted for 3 whole days. The balloon never got retrieved. It ended up deflating and just staying there as a sad reminder. I didn't know why this was happening at the time. I assumed it was grief related. First our parents, then his girlfriend leaving him, then her disappearance. I found his dirty drinking secret. Now he didn't like me anymore. Maybe he resented looking after me. I was already very depressed. My parents' death, my friend's disappearance. And now living with someone who treated me so horribly. I was at rock bottom. I started using my inheritance money to get friends to buy me alcohol. I didn't know how else to deal with my pain. I often spent nights sitting alone on my bedroom floor drinking, just going down Google rabbit holes, random things. I regularly found myself waking up with no memory of passing out the night before. One weekend, I was unsuccessful at getting anyone to buy me some alcohol, and I was starting to feel withdrawals. I really, really, really wanted a drink. I knew where I could find some, but that required me to get into the wine cellar. I knew the wrath I would face if I was caught. But the need for a drink outweighed my fear at the time. I peeked downstairs to where my brother was, and he was fast asleep on the couch while he was watching a movie. This emboldened me. First, I went into his bedroom and I snooped around looking for a key to the lock. I didn't find a key, but I did find a shoebox. And inside was a hunting knife and a rag. The rag looked weird. It had these lines of dried blood. Or I could only assume it was blood. It definitely looked like it. Like he wiped the blade against it and would leave the line. My brother's cutting himself, I thought. Slightly distracted with my mission, I decided to go downstairs while he was sleeping and take the opportunity to confirm if it was true. I creeped down the stairs, into the lounge. There he was, snoring on the couch. He was wearing a t-shirt, and as far as I could tell, his arms and wrists had never been touched. I couldn't see any more of his skin. I was about to risk moving the blanket off his legs when there was a glint in the kitchen that caught my eye. Keys. I walked over, and yes, they were his keys. And upon his keyring sat a smaller key. Definitely not a house or a car key. It must be the padlock key. I placed my hands gently over the top, making sure they didn't move, and I slid them off the bench. I didn't want them making any noise. I unlatched the kitchen door very softly and walked as quietly as possible outside. About halfway down the yard, I started to rush. I wanted to get to the wine cellar and return before he woke. I unlocked the wine cellar door and I flicked the switch, turning on the light. There was no wine in the wine cellar. And then I heard it.
What took you so long?
I spun, and to my right side, in the corner, was a girl. She was sitting in a pile of dirty clothes like a nest. That must have been her bed. She had a collar around her throat, connected to a chain that was bolted to the wall. She had some clothes on, but they were torn and slashed. You could see scars on her belly that were shaped like crosses. I ran to her immediately and fumbling with the keys, trying to find something that would release her. We were both crying, and I realized that the key for this wasn't here. I reached into my back pocket and grabbed my phone, and I dialed 911 instead.
911, what is your emergency?
My brother is going to kill me and my best friend. She's been missing, and I've found her. She's in our cellar.
We have your location. Sending a patrol unit now.
Suddenly, the phone was ripped away from my ear, and I could hear the beep of the call ending. My heart was sinking. Kira was backing against the wall, looking horrified, and I looked up to see my brother, and I screamed. He was red in the face. It was twisted into a furious mask of hate. In his hand, he had the hunting knife from earlier, and he was bellowing at me that I was not allowed to be here. He reached and he grabbed me, and then we heard the sirens. His head shot up as he heard them. He looked at me for a moment, pure anger and hate in his features. Then he turned and he ran. She was locked away for 8 whole months in total. My brother was found a week later, dead from an overdose in the next state. I was questioned heavily, but in the end the police had determined that I was just another victim of my brother. Kira and her family also didn't blame me for what happened. That I was thankful. We all have a lot to work through, none more than Kira. I will always be here for her, but to this day she has never told me what happened during those 8 months. And I'm not sure she ever will.